Welcome back, my friends. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we continue studying through the Word of God together. In this section, the last few months, a couple months, we've been going through the book of Genesis, and now we are in Genesis chapter 43. If you want to follow along with us, and we are in the account in this section in the narrative of Genesis where Joseph he's been in slavery, been through prison, is now the second in command. The 7 years of plenty have come, 7 years of famine are now upon them. And as a result of all of this, now Joseph's brothers have come to get food. The first time he sends them home with a long test, keeps Simeon. And now what we do is we find ourselves, they're coming back. They've run out of food. It's been a period of time. Simeon's in jail. Joseph is still, I believe, testing them, trying to find out, can his brothers be trusted after all the things they did to him? Can he be trusted? Can they be trusted? Is their father alive? Is their brother alive? The horrible thing they did, they could have kept doing that. And so now he's trying to figure out, is this a group of guys I can trust? Has God changed them? He can see from his perspective how now that he's in a position of authority, he can see that how God's dream and how God's vision he gave to him and the future, what he told him, he can see how that's all turned out. So you got to believe that Joseph has a different perspective to this entire thing of seeing his brothers. Well, what we're going to look at in a few verses before us this morning is we're going to look at another bit of the perspective. We've been kind of bouncing back and forth between Joseph's perspective and his brothers this morning. We're going to look specifically at his perspective as one of the main aspects of the dream that was given to him 20 plus years earlier is now come in to full fruition again. It happened before as they bowed themselves down, but even more here, you get to see the reality of kind of the power Joseph has and how his brothers respond to it. So we're in Genesis chapter 43, verse 16. Now remember, the brothers had brought Benjamin back. Reuben had stated, or Judah had stated, for his life, he would protect him. Jacob's afraid of all of this. Israel's afraid of this, but they're going to be out of food anyway. So there's a lot of trepidation, a lot of fear going on at this time. And so they come back, and Joseph now sees the brother. Remember, a lot of them are brothers from different mothers, same father. There was a couple mothers plus it was just about 4 different women that the brothers came from. But this one is from his mother, which makes them pure blood brothers. She couldn't have a lot of sons, and so there's just this unique bond between the two of them. And so we see that in verse 16. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my home, slaughter an animal, and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon." Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And so Joseph immediately recognizes his brother, he sees it all, and you begin to see Joseph's heart begin to soften a little bit. He didn't trust him. He, wasn't sure that they treat him as spies, treat him harshly. Now bring him to my house. Now he's beginning this process of reconciliation, beginning to see that what Satan meant for bad, God meant for good. And he's beginning to see how all of it planned out and what God had allowed to happen. Verse number 18. Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money which was returned in our sacks for the first time that we were brought in, so that they may make a case against us and seize us to take us as slaves with our donkeys." Now, if you remember, the last time they were sent home, their money was placed back in the bag. The money they brought to purchase the food was placed back in their bags, plus money for travel. And so now, of course, remember, they'd been accused of being spies. So now, for sure, they're coming back, and they're thinking being sent to Joseph's house is proof that they're in massive trouble. Now, my assumption would be that if they really wanted to deal with his brothers as spies, they would have done it right there in that spot. They would have found maybe a different. Taking him to his house, it seems to be not the place that he would be doing a lot of the legal work in that aspect. Anyway, they get nervous, and legitimately nervous. They're still reeling. They're still trying to figure out what's going on. You ever notice how sometimes when you get nervous, you're not sure what's going on, you just begin to try to conclude and assume what's happening. You try to figure out, okay, why is this? And in this situation, you take it to the worst scenario, as a lot of us often do. Let's continue to see, and it makes sense, but this situation is different. So let's continue to see how this works out. Verse 19. When they drew near to the stewards of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house and said, "Sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. But it happened when he came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, so we have brought it back in our hand. And we have brought down other money in our hands to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks, but he, this is the servant, said, Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Now, this is an intriguing aspect. They come in full conclusion that they're about to be sold into slavery as a result of stealing money or however they thought it worked out. And so they go to the slave. Now, remember, it's an Egyptian slave. And they go to him and they panic and they try to explain what's happening. They say they don't know what happened. In the middle of this, Joseph's slave references Jehovah God, your God and the God of your father. Now, it's intriguing. We don't know exactly all of why, except for maybe the fact that he worked with Joseph. And Joseph, even though an Egyptian, even though 13 years in slavery and in prison, Joseph never defied his God, never gave up on believing on Jehovah God. So to me, it comes easy to believe that in this situation, Joseph has been bragging on his God this entire time. Joseph has been talking about it, believing it, and whether this servant has converted over to that, or whether the servant's just stating this is what Joseph has stated, or what he wanted to believe, you do see that the impact, the influence that Joseph has as a follower of Jehovah God was still in full impact. I tell you, what an amazing thing. We talked about this before, that even though Joseph was going through some of the worst parts of his life, more than you can imagine, he never gave up on believing on God, and he never gave up on trusting in him and obviously proclaiming him, maybe even telling others about the dream that would come. And all of this, Joseph still honored God in the darkest of times. And it just goes back to remind us, in the dark times, and maybe in our country, dark times in your life, we look at it, we wonder what God is doing. I encourage you to say, what can I learn? How can I honor God, even in this dark time? How can I honor God? What can I learn and grow? When it's all said and done and you see God begin to unfold his plan, it's amazing to watch that happen. But I encourage you that even in the time you don't know, continue to honor him, because when God does unfold it, you can see more and more of what you're honoring him in the hard time has been. So I encourage you, wherever you're planted, wherever's going on right now, honor God with it and see how he continue to use that. Let's continue on. He brought Simeon out to them. Let's go to verse 24. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that he would eat with bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he well? Now he's still being deceptive a little bit. The old man you spoke, he hasn't told them who he is. But here's another aspect where they don't just bow down. They bow down all the way to the ground. Now, again, another reminder, another full fulfillment of the dream 20 plus years earlier. A full fulfillment, another reminder of what God says, I know you've gone through all of this, but look at how I'm using, look what I'm doing. And he's just able to look down, and just the emotion must be beginning to fill him up. And then he asks about his father. And then, verse 28, then he answered, Your servant, our father, is in good health. He's still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves again. Verse 29, then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Now his heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went to his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. And he restrained himself, and he said, Serve thy bread. Now you've got a spot. He runs away for a little bit. He sees his brother, and he just wants to embrace him. He just really wants to tell everybody who he is and what's going on. Now, it does make you wonder why not. And we'll see in a little bit, there's one more test going on. He's still testing his brothers to find out if they can be trusted. But you see in this situation where he's ready. He really wants to be able to move on from this. Verse 32, so they set him in a place by himself, and them by themselves. And the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. And he took servings to them for before him, and Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. The one thing you find intriguing in this aspect is that Joseph sat them in order of their age, which would be normal, but who would have known? They sat there in complete astonishment. Who would have known their order of their age? And then, of course, Benjamin receives more than the rest of them. And you see all of this, and you begin to see the full end unfold. You begin to see all that Joseph's trying to show them, kind of in a slow, bit of a deceptive way. And what you see in Joseph, you can imagine Joseph, again, yeah, he's living in wealth and he's received all the blessings of God's promise, but now he's seeing the full circle. And emotionally, this has probably got to be the hardest or the most exciting for him as he watches what God is doing through this entire situation. Let me encourage you, whether you're in the middle of middle of the darkness, middle of the struggle, or you're finding God's plan unfold, continue to look at him, continue to look to him, continue to walk close and grow. And really fear, how is it that I can honor him in the midst of this, even when a lot of what's going on does not make sense? And you will see that God's plan will unfold in his time. In this situation, it took over 20 years to see this. But in his time, God's plan unfolded, and it was better than anybody could have ever planned. Well, we do appreciate the privilege you give to us to be part of your day. Hope it's a help and encouragement. Hope you stick with us as we continue and jump into chapter 44 next time. Again, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next time.